listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hello and welcome along to a brand new episode of the Straight to Video podcast. And have I got a great chat for you today. I think this one might probably be the best definition of what I had in mind when I set out to start this podcast. Cast your minds back to good old 1987. At a push, I think, in my opinion at least, it might well be one of the best years ever for films, at least when it comes to stuff which I've watched over and over again. Hear me out. You've got Lethal Weapon, Predator, Planes, Trains and Automobiles, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Good Morning Vietnam. Dang, do I go on? Even some lesser known films which I love like Summer School and Can't Buy Me Love came out that year too. It really was a good one. Also in 1987 we saw the release of The Monster Squad. Now you know The Monster Squad, right? I thought everyone did. Certainly a regular film I'd rent from the video store, and I recall seeing it in an issue of Fangoria, the horror magazine. I think it was in the same one as maybe Evil Dead 2 and The Lost Boys. I saw photos of this group of kids fighting against classic movie monsters like Dracula, the Wolfman and Creature from the Black Lagoon. I was like in right away. And when I eventually saw the film, it did not disappoint. It had everything you love about 80s films. Great characters, fun story, badass effects and creature makeup and great quotes. It's a definite hit movie in my book, hence why I figured everyone on the planet was a fan, right? Well, apparently not. Seems The Monster Squad didn't do so great at the box office, but it did become a sleeper hit on VHS. So much so that in 2006, when some special screenings were held, them things just sold out immediately and a new buzz was created. This buzz earned the film its first DVD release, and since then the Monster Squad has been given a brand new lease of life, which is celebrated in the new documentary Wolfman's Got Nards. If you've seen the film, you'll know what I'm on about. So on today's Straight to Video podcast, I am super excited to present you with a chat I had with the movie's squad leader, André Gower, who played Sean Crenshaw. André, along with Ryan Lambert from the movie, have been on something of a movie road trip the past few years, visiting movie theatres and showing the Monster Squad to sell-out audiences both old and new, whilst filming interviews and reactions from fans, catching up with old co-stars and crew from the film to create this amazing documentary, which is available on Blu-ray and DVD and also for streaming if you're in the US. An international release is in the works too, so please check this out when you can. I mentioned earlier that this chat kinda nails the blueprint for what I wanted the Straight to Video podcast to be. In that, I got to chat to someone who played a big part in something that had a huge impact on me growing up, but other than that, André is such a great storyteller. He doesn't shy away from anything to do with the film and the time it was released. In fact, it's quite the opposite. He embraces it fully and has so many unbelievable stories to share about growing up in the 80s in Hollywood and the industry of that time, along with other things that shaped him as a person too. It was an absolute joy to chat to him, and I hope it comes across that way. If you've never seen The Monster Squad, I hope this talk maybe inspires you to check it out. If you have seen it, I hope you go and watch it again and then check out the new documentary Wolfman's Got Nards. Heck, if you're a fan of any movie, then you'll appreciate this documentary. It really is that good, and like The Monster Squad itself, it has so much heart. For more information, visit thesquaddoc.com, and you can also find André on Twitter simply at André Gower or on Instagram at André Gower Official. So thanks for hearing me out as I rambled on. But for now, please enjoy my chat with the super cool André Gower.
I don't wanna go All right. How's that?
Excellent. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, pretty good. Thank you. Thanks ever so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me on. I'm checking out your background. It looks like all good music covers, posters.
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. Okay, got it. Yeah. I see Van Halen. I saw that first. Okay.
That's the one that everybody spots. I guess it's because it's iconic.
Well, it's very recognizable. Yeah, it's very iconic.
You're from a family with acting history. Is your sister, is it Carlina? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, her name's Carlina. Yeah. She's a couple years older than I am, or a few years older than I am. And she started working very young, just like I did. And then I sort of was kind of, I guess, next in line, or just I was always around it, and it went from there. But yeah, she worked quite a bit in the 70s and early 80s. And her most awesome thing that she did is she's the little girl in the Towering Inferno.
She went in big pretty early.
Yeah, she went in big early, and yeah, it's hard to top that. So it's that's a great thing to have on your on your CV, I guess.
So that was in 1974. So you'd have been literally only just born by then. So when did you kind of become aware of the whole acting world?
Probably, like I said, I was literally on that set.
Wow.
According to the stories, I got to go to that. My mom brought me to that set a couple times. So I technically got to see or meet all those awesome people in that movie, but I don't remember it, of course. But I probably 5 or 6 is when I really started actually working. So that's when you really are kind of around it, and not only around it, but you're inside of it. Started with a lot of commercials and print work back when we actually printed, magazines and newspapers and catalogs and things like that, well before the internet. Yeah. And it led to, TV movies and TV guest spots and television shows and films. And it just kind of grows. If you stay around, you stick it out, you might get lucky.
Are your parents in the acting field at all? Or was it just your sister, the first one?
Not at all.
No?
But doesn't mean they're not fans of it or enjoyed it. I don't think that you ever have young kids in the entertainment business without at least one parent wanting to be.
Right.
Because, no 5 or 6-year-olds are really going, I know what I want to do, and I'm going to drive there. So I think it's always someone that's either intrigued by it, or a lot of times parents are living vicariously through their kids.
Right.
Or a lot of times parents are, seeing an opportunity not only to have their children in something unique and interesting, but, that may be kind of, a broadening of their world, which is a great position to be in, just as long as they're doing it right. And then some parents are seeing it as a meal ticket, just straight honest.
Yeah.
Not that mine were. That wasn't. I'm not saying my parents were that. I've seen parents like that where they're just honestly seeing their kids as the income for the family, or supplemental, which is kind of rough and kind of unfair. But there's a blend out there. My parents actually. I have a lot of friends in the industry and a lot of friends out of the entertainment industry that always talk about my parents, about how it kind of balanced my life was. It seemed maybe kind of restrictive or boring or, overprotective at some point, at some times. But, in the long run, I think that's all good. Because there's bad stories out there. There's also some amazing stories out there. So hopefully those all balance each other out, and most of us end up in the middle somewhere. But I think I'm on one of the positive sides. I had very supportive parents, but who were also cognizant of the fact that there was another world that included the real world. And not that entertainment's a fake world, but it's just an added world. And a lot of people either choose one or the other. And I think as a kid, and I think, with, kind of the help of my parents for most of my adolescence years, was seeing it as this is a value add, not a distraction from, growing up as a real kid in America, or wherever you're growing up. And I think that helped because look, I'm probably batshit crazy, but, people think I'm kind of wackadoo sometimes, but I think I'm actually pretty even keeled, and I know a lot about a lot of subjects, and I like to learn, and I absorb information, and I loved going to school. I loved going to school all the way from, preschool all the way through college. And then, I still take myself to school after college. I love to learn stuff. So I think that kind of plays into that. I think I was kind of naturally like that, but I think growing up in this business and in this entertainment industry just kind of stoked that a little bit, because you get to learn so much at a young age, and it just kind of really piques your interest of a lot of things.
Was you actually living in Hollywood, or were you kind of somewhere else in LA at that time?
Yeah, I grew up in the Valley, in the San Fernando Valley, which is just north of kind of Hollywood and LA proper. Just a suburb, but everybody knows the Valley, from awesome movies.
I've always wondered that because I'm a big fan of movies and Hollywood and all that kind of thing. But for someone in the UK, how would you describe the Valley?
The Valley's basically a suburb of, Los Angeles proper. It's part of Los Angeles, but there's 16 or 17 kind of incorporated towns in the Valley that are all part of LA City and LA County. I lived at the north end of the Valley, up near the hills. Actually, people recognize that area from quite a few movies and stuff, but most notably from E.T.
Right.
Like the streets and the park and the housing where they rode their bikes and all that. That was one of my old neighborhoods. So it's the north end of the Valley. A lot of people know as E.T. Park.
Cool.
And I don't want to say it's slow, like idyllic kind of suburbia, because it's LA. And in the 70s and 80s, when kind of the suburban sprawl was kind of taking place there, the Valley definitely became one of those attractive places for people that didn't want to live in the city or downtown. And LA is so huge. I mean, LA is ginormous. And this is just, the Valley's kind of the most popular suburb area, at that time. That also got famous in TV shows and movies. Mm-hmm. But, it kind of has, it has its own culture. It has its own kind of dialect. It has its own, kind of feel. And when you're a Valley kid, people know you're a Valley kid.
Exactly. I'm just kind of relating to the film Valley Girl, which I'm a fan of. So you get that kind of...
Absolutely. That's really where kind of that, originated. But, and everybody kind of took that, okay. Because they're like, hey, we're kind of our own thing. People in LA, it's so big that wherever you grow up kind of has its own identity.
Right.
We kind of enjoy that. And look, the Valley's a great place. And, now it's even expanded out of that Valley into other places. It's so big. I'm okay being a Valley kid.
Yeah. Awesome. Was you into anything in particular as a kid other than films? Because you played basketball, right?
Yeah, I was always into sports. I was always active. Grew up playing, little league and youth soccer and things like that. That's the other thing where it's hard to balance, right? If you're not working on a set or doing a TV show or a movie, you're in regular school, And I loved all my schools I went to. I kind of went a mix between public and private for many years, and absolutely adored school. I love my teachers. I loved, going to school. I liked being there, interacting with my friends. I'm a very social person, and I make deep kind of connections and relationships with people because they're the only things that matter in a life. Really, is other people. It doesn't matter what you do or what you have. It's the people that you get to do it with. And I'm still friends with, friends I went to sixth grade
too, man.
with. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know if there was something in the water around that time, but yeah, we all still get on.
But that's that's your neighborhood and that's your club and that's your crew, and you go on adventures and you learn things with these people, and you hit milestones in your life with certain individuals, whether it's the farthest you ever went on your bike outside of your immediate neighborhood, you remember that. And whether you did it by yourself or with your buddy, you remember your first smooches with a cute girl at someone's birthday party, in the back room or something. And, these are all things that, just don't leave they're indelible marks on your personality, not just your memories.
In such a small amount of time as well. That always freaks me out.
There's so much going on really in like your first 15, 16 years of, from like when you're 5 to your 20, like there's so much going on. It seems like there's not as much that goes on in the rest of your life. It just seems to kind of like trudge along, and then it just keeps trudging quicker, and all of a sudden you're pushing 50 and you're like, wait a minute, what happened? I need to call my friend from 7th grade and feel good today.
So did you enjoy The Last Dance, the Netflix show? Did you watch that, being a basketball fan?
I haven't watched it because, you asked what I was into as a kid. Here's sort of the thing. I was into a ton of things.
Right.
And it wasn't just one thing. I played all the sports, whatever season it was. And then when you get into organized sports in high school and then I left to go to college, and that's a whole other podcast. But I was into, I loved hanging out with my friends. I loved going to movies. I loved being in movies and being on TV shows. And kind of balanced all that out. And it was very important that all of that, quote unquote, regular stuff or non-entertainment stuff was serviced. We'd be out on auditions or be on a set, and I'd be chomping at the bit I was like, hey, we got to leave because it's going to take an hour to get to basketball practice, for like my 13-year-old youth rec league or something. And, those were very important things. Yeah. And boy, my parents busted their ass, driving me all over town. And so I think it worked. But I enjoyed having friends over, going to friends' house after school or on Saturday. Saturdays. We didn't spend a lot of time when you were with friends, like watching TV or movies. Sometimes you did. I did that kind of solo.
Okay.
But when you're with your friends, you want to be out doing stuff. And we were outside a lot and riding bikes and going on adventures and going as far as you can, like we've never been this far on our bikes and we're going to get in trouble, let's
and it was
not
safe
turn
back then as well. At least I think it was.
It was, there were still dangers, but it wasn't like today, which is sad. But, I had a great time, great area, great friends, great family of my friends, and you just become close. And we were very social. And, people came over for holidays or to hang out. And we always had birthday parties. And, we always tried to have epic birthday parties, like on milestones and have a ton of people over. And that was pretty cool, too. I still have, boxes of photos, from those times. And
yeah, I've got no photos from when I was a super young kid. I'm like, nobody took any photos.
We took quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's also weird when your life is also sort of chronicled in photos, that you didn't take, that other people took because they were on the TV screen or, in a magazine or in a catalog. So I have, a whole second pile of photographs that chronicled your life. So that's, you're always, you always had a camera on you or near you sometimes. So you got to get used to that. Some people don't like their picture taken.
No.
Like if you don't like your picture taken, then don't be in this world. And now everybody loves to take their own photo and show everybody on the planet what they're doing when we don't give a shit. I don't care about your third selfie today. Please stop.
How was it for you as a kid? Obviously going in for auditions and stuff like that. You were seeing the contrast from the Valley going into, I'm presuming the auditions were kind of in the Hollywood area. So was you seeing this stark contrast?
For the most part, and there was a lot of stuff in the Valley. 4 major studios are out in the Valley. And so really the biggest thing to answer that question is how was that is I learned my geography of LA and streets and directions at a very young age. And so I knew how to go everywhere whenever I wanted to. And I knew the shortcuts and knew what time traffic was. Back then we had traffic times. Now it's just all traffic. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
What was fun is, then you get to the age where you have, your driver's license and your car and your friends are going around and they don't know how to get anywhere. And I'm like, oh, turn left here and then go down and turn right on Ventura and you'll be right there.
Yeah.
It's because I was in the car my entire life learning how to get to places. And one of the cool things that both my parents did before internet, before GPS, before nav on your phone, there was a thing called the Thomas Guide. And it was this spiral brown map of whatever city you lived in. And LA's was about that thick.
Yeah.
But it was this genius map system that you didn't have to spread out. And it was in a flip style kind of spiral binder. And if you got to the edge of this page, it told you where to go.
Right.
And then you flip there and it had every single street and address in LA County. And that was one of the exercises that I would kind of navigate. And so like my mom or my dad, would be like, okay, where are we going today? Find it in the map. And I think that's why I have a really good sense of direction wherever I'm at. Or if I've been somewhere once, like I can go there 3 years later in a different city and drive there. So, yeah.
You've got a great TV resume, even before Monster Squad, which kind of reads like most of my favorite TV shows of the time. The A-Team, Knight Rider, TJ Hooker, Twilight Zone, and even Highway to Heaven, right? I used to watch that with my grandparents. I used to love it.
I did.
So as a kid in the 80s, was that a big deal for you or was it more of a big deal for your friends because they were perhaps watching those shows?
I would say both. I mean, it's when you start so early, of course, these shows and you know what it is to be either, auditioning for them or actually doing them or seeing your friends on them. Because if you're not on them, some of your friends are probably on them. And so you get to catch that because back then there wasn't that much TV. There was 3 networks and maybe 1 or 2 syndicated channels and PBS, like where you lived. And, this is pre-cable, and obviously pre-streaming, anything like that. But even when cable came out, like I was a kid, I never even had I didn't have cable. I just had your 3 networks. And then we finally got a 4th when Fox became a network. So you watched just about everything that was on TV on Monday through Friday nights and then movies on the weekends. To do these shows, like it's a great opportunity. And you mentioned, a handful of cool stuff that I got to do. The only reason I got to do all those is my television career as a kid, the trajectory of that is interesting because I am a young actor that did 5 or 6 TV series that only went 1 season instead of one show that went like 6 years that everybody knows. And it's, it's just a big hit. So that's sort of like a weird asterisk, in my timeline. But what that also did is I got to do more stuff than other people. Like some people have only done 1 show. Like it's, maybe 1 TV show for 5 years and that's all they got to do. I got to do 5 or 6 or 7 for a season. So there's a little bit more kind of experience and exposure. But then you also have the time off to do a lot of cool episodics, because if you're tied into a big show, you're not going to be able to go do, the A-Team or, Knight Rider or something like that. And I got an opportunity to, do a lot of great shows. And when you're a fan of a show like the A-Team and you get to do it, I mean, you're a kid, it's cool.
Was there anyone from those shows who were like a really good to work with, or perhaps you learned anything from?
I think on the episodic type stuff, you come in and out, and so you don't get to really build a relationship with too many of those people. When you do other shows, you definitely get that, and that's a whole other conversation. But I think kind of great experiences are like Mr. T was he was actually a really cool dude. That whole cast was, and my favorite actor on that show is Dwight Schultz by far, who played Murdoch, of course. But, Mr. T was as cool as it gets, in 1984 or 85, right? He scared the crap out of me in Rocky 3. I did not like him, in his debut. Like, that was a bad character. Like, no one liked Clubber Lang, right? But then you get, this different guy who's not Clubber Lang. And, he knew that, his fan base were kids, and he was really cool, with you, because most of my stuff was with Mr. T on that episode. And it was also kind of cool as double, because we got to go way up in the mountains in California, and we were lumberjacks on that episode. So like, you get to be out in the woods, and you're working with the A-Team, and I always like to joke, since we're talking about A-Team, I always do the caveat. I'm pretty positive, and if I'm wrong, please let me know. The internet world out there, but I think I'm the only person that has chopped down a tree with Mr. T. And like I said, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. And so that's kind of cool. And you have that memory, and those YouTube tidbits, and but getting to do the cool iconic stuff, it's certainly awesome. But then later on, like, people are like, wait, what? You were in KIT, you were on, all these great shows. And most of your friends, like we were talking about, the great friends that I had that were not in entertainment business, like my neighborhood friends or, family friends, they all knew and understood, and it wasn't that big of a deal. They were, you were just their friend that also happened to be on TV. You weren't their friend because you were on TV, you were just friends.
Yeah.
And then you had entertainment-based friends who are I have lifelong friends there too, because when you start early and, there's a bunch of kids that are all the same age doing the same stuff at the same time, you grow up with them too. So I have this whole other world of people that didn't live in my neighborhood that I wouldn't be friends with if I wasn't in entertainment. And so like I said, I'm very lucky, and it's almost greedy, because you get double the friends, in your life. I have lifelong friends there. You mentioned like that an episode of Highway to Heaven, you get to work with lifelong friends, like Bobby Jacoby or something like that, and he ended up doing Tremors, and so you grow up with each other, and you all get to celebrate each other, and a handful of us get to continue into adulthood. And some of my close friends and part of the crew and your teen Rat Pack scene, when you get into the teenage years, it's totally different. It's a whole other world. But, some of those great faces and names are still some of the great faces and names out there. And they're working and doing amazing stuff on camera and behind the camera. And, you've got to celebrate that too.
Yeah, I say you was working your way through Hollywood at a time when there was many big young actors, such as you had the two Coreys, and there was the whole Brat Pack explosion a couple of years before. Who were your kind of peers who you was looking up to? I guess you were kind of auditioning at the same time as those guys. Yeah,
you kind of go, as you can imagine, in your teenage years of the teen celebrity type of scene, like, and you mentioned kind of like the Brat Pack of the early mid 80s, and those are the the Estevez and Molly Ringwald and Judd Nelson and Ali Sheedy, Anthony Michael Hall, I just did the cast of The Breakfast Club. That's all I'll just go with, right? And, those are awesome people. And, you're 10, 11, 12 at those time when those people are kind of awesome, cool, like really cool teenagers.
I guess you're watching John Hughes films and stuff like that.
So you're watching them, and you get the, and luckily enough that I was a kid, I got to work early and young. And then my sister's a little older, and she knew a bunch of people, because she's in that age range.
Yeah.
And so I was around all those people as well. So I got to go to events and parties and things that, the 10-year, 12-year-old probably wouldn't normally get invited to. So that was also kind of cool. Then you graduate into kind of that scene, it's just the awesome, there's definitely the pinnacles of talent and faces like the River Phoenixes and my close friends that are still great today. You got to mention Ryan Lambert, from Monster Squad. Once we did that movie, we were friends, and he was huge in the teen scene. Alyssa Milano, Nicole Eggert, all these, Jason Hervey, who happens to be in Monster Squad. We were friends for decades before even, that time, it seems like. One of my favorite names and faces that honestly was always a nice kid, always did good work, and super talented, was Scott Grimes. And, Scott might not have been he was in the teen magazines and was always around and doing stuff. But what you realize when you look back is Scott has done so much great work since that time.
Right.
And, he's been in my favorite show of all time is ER. And he was on ER for 5 years or something, and has a I think, and I'm kind of an ER snob and expert, right. But he kind of, I think besides Noah Wiley's character, which is the arc of the show, actually, Scott had this fantastic arc as a character that could have been annoying and written off in the first year, right. But then it really comes full circle. But you watch Scott create that and become that person. It's fantastic. And then he goes on and does Band of Brothers and, all this amazing stuff. I'm like, how is my old, this guy Scott, who I've known as a kid, gets in all this amazing stuff. Yeah. And you just got to sit there and marvel at it and celebrate and cheer from the rafters, for people like that. And what's amazing about that time is there's an amazing handful of faces that everybody knows now that was around back then, but they weren't who they are.
Right.
And you forget that they were around because they weren't necessarily names back then or hadn't become a name yet. And so you'll end up pulling out these old magazines or old photos. And my favorite thing is in old teen magazines, there'd be a group photo of a bunch of kids at a party or something. And then, it'll say, Mr. President's, André Gower and, so-and-so Scott Grimes and Alyssa Milano and David Faustino and Brian Austin Green and newcomer Heather Graham, and wow. You're like, wait, okay. That means she hadn't done anything yet at the time. And there's all this tall, gorgeous blonde girl standing there. And you're like, oh, that's right. We used to hang out with Heather Graham.
Unreal.
And then you'd see another photo with the same thing. And there'd be, and John Voight's daughter, Angie Jolie, and you're like,
wow,
wait. And then, the ultimate one obviously is all those same parties and birthdays. And, all of a sudden there's a tall blonde kid that's got this kind of cute cherubic face, with this big grin and floppy hair standing behind you. And you're like, well, damn it, that's Brad Pitt. You're like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And, it's these people that haven't, that are around, yeah. But you've done more than they have at the time, which is just weird. And so, those are great things to look back and see those kind of photos and be like, Brad Pitt came to my birthday party.
Wow.
You're like, or to my best friend's birthday, what is happening here? It's like, and that's all just kind of out in the event space. But, we all used to get together and go to people's houses and cook out and swim in the pool and, get in the jacuzzi at, so-and-so's house. And those are all cool because those were kind of regular times. And, you just got to look back and kind of appreciate the opportunity because not very many people get to do that.
No, especially for us over in the UK, just the tiniest little snippet of that to me is mind blowing. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's sort of what's interesting about the difference of kind of the celeb culture, or is kind of the UK media is is all is kind of like tabloid first, and mm-hmm. really about you've got the royals, which kind of take page one of everything, every day, right? And we've gotten into that now a little bit more over the last 10 or 15 years, but. I can't imagine it. It's a little different, a little more acerbic over there, it seems, right? But, here it was a little bit more, I couldn't imagine if they had the teen kind of magazine celeb thing back in, which they did, because a lot of, kind of the musicians and other actors, still had, teen scene over there, but you weren't in the middle of it. So I don't know if it treated people differently or not. I think we were kind of insulated a little bit over here, even though it's crazy and wild to all the time see your face and name in something.
Yeah.
It's not like today. Now it's instant. Like if you're somewhere and someone takes a photo, it is the world seeing it in about 8 seconds.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you could do an event and get your photo taken there, but you wouldn't see it for 3 or 4 weeks until the magazine got printed. So it's
the same as being a big music fan as well. The access you have to your favorite bands these days is just incredible. Whereas before you never knew what they spoke like or anything like that. You were just waiting for the next copy of Hit Parade or Metal Edge to finally, that's them at an album release party or something like that.
And you don't know what they look like not on stage in their getup or performing. And I remember being a kid, it would blow my mind that, bands are, I was really young, bands or songs I'd like. And then I realized the person had an accent and, and wasn't from Kansas. I was like, wait, This person's from London. Like, I didn't know they were British. Like, this is blowing my mind as a 7-year-old. But those are fun things to learn. And and then once you understand that, it's not really quite as jolting. But today the access and the immersion is absolutely incredible. And I can't imagine navigating that I try to navigate it as best I can as, whatever I'm doing, which is nowhere near the level of these people are just, it's insane. And, now the amount of followers you have is literally your barometer of importance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I never really agreed with that. I still don't, but that kind of pervaded the industry and on the executive business side of it, that was your value.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's your value if it's just about sheer number of impressions, and it counts for a handful, but not for everybody. And, it's really unfortunate.
It's more instant reward rather than long-term reward.
Right. I've even had, meetings with agencies and agents that you're looking to work with, and they decide to pass on you, like, oh, well, you don't have that many Twitter followers. And I'm like, let's look at the resume, the ability, and what I can do in the room when you do your job and get me an audition. But early on, I think it's changed a little bit. It's still important. You still have to have that. It's still a real thing. But I looked at him and I said, how many do you want? What's your minimum? Because I can buy all those in about 8 minutes right now. It's like literally their services. I can buy you 10,000 right now. I'll do it while we're talking. What do you want? I don't have that many followers on social media. I'm not as social media engaged as I probably should be. I try to be as genuine and responsive as I am, and only kind of really say something when it's important, which is the mistake. But I think just about 100% of the people that follow me are actual people. It's like they're real people, and they give a shit. They actually care. So I'd rather have, let's just call it 95%. I'd rather have 95% real humans that care than like a hit rate of like 35 or 40% that are just following you for naught.
Perhaps robots and bots and stuff like that.
Yeah. Which is insane. It's machines, hurry up and take over and kill us all, and we'll all be better for it. It's fine. But we know that's coming.
Speaking of auditions and stuff, I didn't know this, but didn't you audition for Teddy Duchamp in Stand By Me, the Corey Feldman?
I did, yeah. Yeah. Speaking of, this is all kind of tied in with that era and that time when you're a kid in the business, and whatever your age range is, there's only so many kids in the business at one time. There's kind of like a block of kids. And I kind of looked at it years later and realized that about 20% of the block of kids do about 80% of the work.
Right.
Because like you mentioned before, there wasn't that much, there wasn't that much content or roles for kids. And you're usually someone's offspring or something if you were showing up as a kid. There wasn't a lot of there was no kids programming really. And there wasn't shows dedicated to kids until that started to change a little bit. And I was a part of one of those, which I thought was awesome. So what that means is when you're lucky enough to have either good agents and you're known in the industry with the casting directors and producers, you get asked to audition for stuff, and you're going to read for everything. And everybody's going to read for the same stuff. So, all of us growing up in this, industry that we all talked about, we all read for the same stuff. And you just see who ends up actually getting cast in it. Mm-hmm. You can't get jealous or mad or angry or frustrated. There's roles that you always wanted to get because it would have been cool to be that role, but it doesn't necessarily mean you would have been better. And look, I remember screen testing for, Stand By Me, which, you had to read I think we ended up reading the short story, prior maybe. And then, it's going to be a Rob Reiner. This was a big movie. I mean, Stephen King story, Rob Reiner directed, and they were looking for an ensemble of young kids, and they found a great 4-pack. And I think everybody's exactly in the right spot for that.
Do you remember the scene you read for?
I with Teddy Duchamp, I think it was kind of his emotional scene after, the kids got on him. He's talking, my dad stormed the beach at Normandy thing. I think that I remember that, I think is what it was. And, and Feldman's fantastic in that movie.
I think that's where he peaked.
I do too. He was always actually good. And I'd like to see him. We're not going to get on a Corey Feldman tangent, but what honestly, just from someone I've known literally almost my entire life, I'd like to see him be able to do the thing that he's good at, which is being a character and reading dialogue that someone wrote. And I'd love to see that. Instead of all the other stuff that he's trying to do, but that's a whole other story and a whole other background and reasons why. And I wish it was different for him, but he's great in a lot of stuff that he does, including Stand By Me.
So when it came to Monster Squad, you originally tried out for the role of Rudy, which Ryan Lambert ended up getting, and you got the role of Sean, which is effectively the lead role.
That's kind of the funny story that, people ask a lot. And it's because of my body of work leading up to, whatever that August audition time for Monster Squad. I think it was I think we started reading for that in August of '86. I was I had played 2 or 3 different cool characters on TV shows. Great hair, a lot of hair product, leather jacket, something like that, and had some style. And so that was just sort of when the breakdown comes down and agents are pushing out clients or getting requests for roles, like, oh, this is what he does well. Let's, he's got to read for this role because it's on the page. It says cool kid, leather jacket, spiky hair or something like that. And, I went and auditioned for the role of Rudy, went through that process. And a number of weeks later, you get that call and said, hey, that movie you read for, they cast you in it. And then you have to ask 2 questions. Which movie? And because you're auditioning, numerous times a week for different stuff. I mean, and sometimes in the same day. Yeah, it's similar now, but there's a lot of self-taping and internet, and so even without pandemic shutdowns, like it's a lot easier. But you used to be in the car and go around. You'd have 3, 4, 5, 6 auditions an afternoon and into the evening, and at 3:00, you're reading for a giant studio movie. And at 4:00, you're auditioning for a commercial. And at 5:00, you got to run across town to go audition for a TV show. So it's just crazy. And that's where you learn how to get around town. Like I was saying before, they said, they got cast in that movie, that monster movie, the Monster Squad, but they didn't give you the role that you read for. And usually that's bad news. Usually you get a smaller role or a different role. And they're like, no, it's actually good news. They actually just straight cast you as the lead. And I was still, disappointed because Rudy's the cool character, obviously, right? That only lasted, that lasted a little bit because then you realize that, wow, you're now the lead of this movie, not just some cool co-star.
Do you think they saw something in the way you portrayed Rudy in your role that would work as Sean?
That's the interesting thing, which, over the last couple of years, I've always had to mention when this comes up is, you've got to be thankful that someone in the room, whether it was Penny Perry, the casting director, was it Fred, was it Shane, was it Peter Hyams, who was it in the room? Because they read 100 other kids for Sean and apparently nobody poked out at them. And trust me, when I say 100 kids read for, there's probably 100 kids that read, for Sean Crenshaw, because it's all the names and people that we've been talking about all morning. Yeah. And you've got to be thankful and appreciative that someone said, remember that kid that read for Rudy that we liked, I guess, but, Ryan Lambert, I know the reason why I didn't get Rudy. Ryan Lambert came in and murdered the audition. Rightly so, he is Rudy because he owned it. Instead of a coolness and a toughness, he brought a vulnerability to that role that people don't realize until you hear Ryan talk about it, and then you see it, and you're like, whoa, shit, this is different. Like, why is the cool kid hanging out with this? Like, it's a whole other thing that ended up coming across with Ryan's performance, which I think is great. But someone in the room said, what about that kid? Let's take the jacket off and wash the crap out of his hair and give him a bad haircut. And I always say, put him in ill-fitting clothes. And could he be the dorky leader instead of the cool kid? And, without even going in, I don't even think pretty sure I didn't go in and re-audition or I don't think that happened. I guess that's movie making. That's, awesome. that's what you got to do as an actor. You got to pivot and do something else. But look, I never lament that fact. Yes, Ryan and I always give each other shit, but Rudy, we know you killed more monsters and stuff like that. I think everybody's in the exactly right spot, and I'm saying that as actually like a third party observer, if you will. And it just ended up being a really cool thing that happened, and you've got to be appreciative that someone. I don't think I've even asked Fred how that came to pass. I might do that next time we're hanging out and just be like, so what was that? I think we may have chatted about it a long time ago, but I don't remember he's mentioned it, but maybe I'll ask him again.
Awesome.
Been long enough that we can bring it up.
The relationships of the characters and the different ages, for me, are one of the key strengths of the film, particularly how it shows how just a couple of years difference in age can mean such a big thing at that time. As you grow older, the age doesn't matter as much. Was that on set for you? Was that something you were conscious of back then, so it was easy to perceive because you perhaps could relate to it in your own friendships and stuff like that when you've got the younger kids?
Yeah, no doubt. That's kind of 2 parallel kind of things right there. And, inside of the movie story with this group of kids that are not all in the same grade, why are most kids that are in 6th or 7th grade and be like, why are you hanging out with, these people? They're not in your grade. Yeah. Why? And I think that ends up being sort of the fabric of the whole story is these are a group of kids that didn't necessarily necessarily as individuals fit in one-on-one with other groups because they liked weird stuff. They liked monster books and vampire literature and, old black and white movies and, pop culture weird stuff. And not everybody likes that or knows enough about it to be, friends with someone that knows all about it. And this is the part about these kids. These kids know everything about all of that stuff. And you're going to find each other. Where do you find each other? On the school ground? Probably in the comic book store, maybe like sitting around, reading a weird book that someone notices. Oh, you read Stephen King? And then like, I like Stephen King. Like, what's your favorite book? And then you have an instant bonding thing.
You're off and running then.
And what's interesting is that I think is how those kids in the story became friends. But what's interesting is that also became the either intentional or unintentional kind of message and thing that kids that saw the movie connected with and realized, no, that's me and my friends.
Right.
And then they connected at the time when they saw the movie as kids. But then even later as adults, that dynamic still occurs when someone walks into a room that's a Monster Squad fan and somebody on the side is wearing a Stephen King rule shirt that they made or bought, or a Wolfman's Got Nards shirt or something. Or someone says something and they go, wait a minute. And then they become friends.
Yeah.
That's what was interesting about this dynamic. That is, it brought these kids together in the story, their love of something. And then when the movie came out, wherever you saw it, because not many people saw it in the theater, as we know, but it made its way around the neighborhood and the schoolyards. These kids passed around their VHS tape or invited their friends over on Saturday mornings from the video store. And that didn't stop then. It continues to go now, and people are still connecting and becoming friends, whether they live in the same apartment building or they live in different countries. That's a unique dynamic that I don't see happening all over the place with different movies and different shows, but I know it happens. And that's really the essence of the documentary. It's not a making of doc. It's not a Monster Squad nostalgia jag. Like, here you go, open up wide, here it comes. We have a little of that because you got to service that.
It's not just DVD bonus footage.
Right. It's really about, when Henry McComas and I were really kind of figuring out what this could be, our main kind of guidepost was, I think it's a story because of my experiences with the fans over 10 or 12 years, was these are really deep connected people that, that are now connected to each other, but connected to this movie for some reason. Why? And then how did this movie impact, why and how this movie impacted them to change their lives, literally. And let's look into that. That's really what Wolfman's Got Nards is really about. It's about how something like cinema, but it could be a book, it could be a TV show, it could, be a graphic novel or whatever. But something like cinema, how that shared experience can change your life or connect you with other people or impact you in some way that it never leaves you. And that's really the essence of what the doc is. And most people get that. Some people don't, and that's fine. But most of the people see that, which is cool.
I think you've mentioned that whilst you're on set, a couple of the monster actors, you only saw them in character. Is it Duncan Regehr as Dracula and also Tom Noonan, who played Frankenstein's monster? So did I read that, or did I hear that to find out more about what they're actually like, you actually rented Manhunter?
Absolutely. They were going to do it on their own, whether or not they just ended up, kind of doing it simultaneously while we were shooting. Duncan and Fred and the product, they were like, I don't want to have a relationship with the kids as Duncan. I only want to be seen as Dracula, and I'm going to stay in character. So I'm on and off the set, and I'm not hanging out with them at lunch and doing all this other stuff. Tom Noonan takes it to another level where we never saw him out of makeup, and not only we never saw him out of character.
So you didn't really know what he looked like in the flesh either.
No, that's, we worked with this guy for like a month or something. And I was like, I got to go to the store and rent, like, what's the last movie this guy was in? And it happened to be Manhunter. And then I always joke, I wish I'd never done that because he scared the crap out of me in Manhunter. But that just shows his ability and his skill and his technical artistry. I mean, he is scary as shit in Manhunter. I mean, that is a bad character.
I always like to ask people, as the video store seems to evoke many happy memories for people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, which was your local video store? And do you remember renting any particular film which you didn't know about, but like, holy shit, I'm getting this on the cover, and it just totally blew you away? For the most part of that era, my local video store was up in Porter Ranch, California, right at the corner of Rinaldi and Tampa Avenue, in a little shopping center. It was in the corner, and like the barber shop where my dad got his haircut, like where I used to get my haircut as a little kid, was owned by a guy named Art Masaki, and then his son took. See, I remember all this stuff.
and this awesome, kind of Japanese family that owned this barbershop. And my dad started going there. And then I used to get my hair cut. I used to hate to get my hair cut. That was a weird thing. And he was the only guy that ended up like being able to cut my hair when I was a kid. So it just stuck. But there's a video store right down the sidewalk called Videos to Go.
Right.
It was like the Roadrunner was the logo. And we just went there because that was our local video store. I remember even earlier than that, like we had to rent the machine while you rented, a movie, because not everybody had a VCR because they just weren't as accessible at that time. And then they just got mass produced and everybody had 3 or 4 in their house.
Did you have to rent the pallet truck to pick it up as well? Because it probably weighed about 10 kilos.
Yeah, it was gigantic. Like I think there was one, like the original was actually came in like a suitcase. It was like a carry-all thing. And you're like, what? And then you had to figure out how to hook it up. And it was just like this technical, wizardry. And all it was like 2 things. And you had to turn your channel to like channel 3 or whatever to get the signal. Yeah, I loved going to video stores, videos to go. I'll tell you this is not embarrassing at all. I don't care. I really loved going to rent anything that had a ninja in it.
Right.
Back in the day. So, Canon films, Golden Globus type stuff and anything with Sho Kosugi, I wore it out. And if you watched, and they were just fascinating, which also the way my brain works is then I see that and I'm fascinated. I want to learn everything about it. So then you go buy books and you go to the shelves, like again, you go to the big shelf in your den of your family house that has the encyclopedias and, you pull out to find out what ninja is. That's the original internet rabbit hole, is you go to like the encyclopedia and then it gives you references and then you go to the library or the bookstore and you buy books on things that you want to learn about. And that's sort of how my brain works is I get interested in something. I want to find out as much as I can about it. And then a point I get to like a saturation point and I may still like it, but that I've moved on to something else, and I'm learning about 80 or 90% about that. So, I'm kind of that fountain of useless knowledge on like 1,000 things.
Quick left turn. Was you a G.I. Joe fan and Storm Shadow was your favorite character or something like that?
G.I. Joe was certainly cool and interesting to me because I wasn't a comic book kid. I had comic books and I enjoyed them because they're visual and they're storytelling. They're great. I didn't get into the series and the collectibles and the clubs and trading back and forth. I would get them as gifts or I'd pick one up and I'd read it and move on to the next one. So I loved I had Spider-Man comics and, things like that. G.I. Joe was fascinating to me, but I'm also a visual person. I'm a TV kid. And so when like the animated series came out, then you start really liking stuff. One thing that was really interesting is that I thought was fascinating because it was so technically foreign to me was when, a Japanese anime and Japanese show, started coming out and crossing the Pacific and getting access to that. And some kids just bolted right to manga and anime. And some of it was so not what I was used to as a kid. So some of it was weird. But one of my all-time favorite animated series was Japanese, was Battle of the Planets, which had G-Force in it, which, you're the group of kids that end up turning into like these birds. And I was like, it's my favorite cartoon of all time. But I was petrified of Robotech. I didn't understand it. Like I think it was a year or two, like I wasn't there yet when it first dropped. And I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't understand it.
Well, there's a Robotech shirt in Monster Squad, right?
Yeah, I think Eugene's wearing it, which just shows how cool he was. Because when I was that, I was like, no, this is weird because I'd rather go see my, Hanna-Barbera. Yeah. And that's what's interesting about growing up in the States in the 70s and 80s, you got cartoons on Saturday morning that were from the 40s and 50s and all the way up into your day. So, and I absorbed all of that. And another interesting thing is people think cartoons are dumb and silly, but especially there was a lot of history in those. There was actually a lot of adult content, a lot of historical stuff that they would, touch on. And just like today's animation always touch on social issues or politics or world events, nothing was different 10, 15, 30, 40 years prior to that, but you just weren't around to understand it. And so I remember learning about people and world events and different things like because Bugs Bunny would do it.
Yeah.
And, I knew who Edward G. Robinson was before I ever saw Edward G. Robinson as a movie star.
That's crazy.
Which I probably didn't see until I was in junior high or high school. But I was like, oh, that's the guy Bugs Bunny would always impersonate. And or Cagney or all these old kind of crazy things and Elvis and you're like, this is
and it's lodged in your brain for like something that crops up later on. It's like, oh, that's what.
Yeah, later on you realize that Bugs Bunny did a lot of subversive stuff too. It's like right there. It's like, he dressed in drag a lot. He impersonated people a lot. He was very sneaky and conniving, and he was kind of a shit. But he was your hero. I loved all the Hanna-Barbera. I love Warner Brothers. Looney Tunes, and even the old stuff. I kind of like, even black and white animation. You watch and you're like, this is fascinating, because like I said, I was a TV kid. I absorbed so much TV as a kid. And it didn't matter almost what it was. And there was a time where I was like 10 or 12, or I had a TV in my bedroom. It was a small black and white television. And it was fine because late at night or early in the morning, you were watching old black and white TV shows or black and white movies or cartoons. It didn't matter if your TV sucked. It was, hey, look, there was color TVs out there, but I was like, I didn't have one in my room yet, but that's okay. So you watch like the Little Rascals and you watch the Honeymooners. And I was like, when was this show made? This is genius. The comedy in here is hilarious. And then you watch black and white movies on Saturday afternoons. And I was a huge Kung Fu theater. You watch cartoons on Saturday morning, and then you get some like, midday matinee classic movie that no kids are going to watch. They're going to go outside and play. Like, and I would bounce back and forth Inside and Out. And then Kung Fu Theater was on in the afternoon on Saturdays. And you just watch all of that fantastic Hong Kong theater, with Kung Fu masters and all that. You're just like, this is insane. Like, what is this whole other world? I'm into this. Is amazing.
I love it. The Monster Squad is one of those films which I think for a lot of people, it holds such great love and nostalgia because it was one that really boomed on VHS. Do you know it's quite a collectible VHS in the UK on VHS trading markets?
I do. I mean, it is kind of also in the States too, but the UK release is different. It's got sort of the same art, but it's got the red border and it's got the weird claw hand with the amulet, which I think is a really neat art version of it, right? And I've signed 1,000 of them, right? I love to see those, and that's what's interesting about the VHS, and I think that kind of goes with the legacy of the film itself, because if you did like it and you never saw it again because it disappeared for 20 years, that last VHS that you could get your hands on was literally a collectibles item. And so whether it's the UK version that you got from your local video store, that you rented so much that the managers just gave it to you, or, you stole it and never returned it.
Some hefty late
and your
fees
mom's
on that thing.
credit card gets hit, with the heavy fee on it, right? These are all those stories and those experiences of what ended up me realizing that those fans' connection to this movie is fascinating. And hearing their stories, I thought their stories were a story. And that's why we have the Squad Dog, is why we have Wolfman's Got Nards. But even in the States, like the Vestron video release kind of box cover is pretty badass, because it's a great poster art. Missing one thing, like that's a great poster, that kind of black and blue with us sitting on the car. It's like, it's a very iconic poster that has also influenced a lot of other movie, even current day, genre movie posters. People notice references in it. But the one thing about our awesome poster is the hero of the movie is not on it. Phoebe is not on the poster of the movie. And so, she's always been kind of grousing about that for years. And we're sitting there supporting her going, how is the hero of the movie not on the movie poster?
Has anyone ever done a version of it?
I want to see that, and I want them to re-release it. Hell, maybe I'll do it. I mean, it's, and the reason was like, that was a photo shoot. Like we got together in a parking garage in Santa Monica, I remember it, and sat on the hood of a car, not that one. And did kind of the pose in costume. And then they kind of artistically, revised the image and put it on the poster. And Ashley, for some reason, was working that day or couldn't make it or something. And I was like, then why do you take her off the poster? Just because she couldn't make the day that was scheduled? I think she was actually working on another commercial or something, was unable to make the photo shoot. But I was like, then just take a photo of her on another day and put her in. This isn't a photo. It's like, you could have put her in there. I mean, come on. And I mean, they've been doing this for Wheaties boxes for 40 years. Come on. And I don't know why she's not on there. I think it's a mistake. The only poster she's on is the Australian release.
Crazy.
I love all of the international posters. They're all just crazy fun, including the Italian one, which has nothing to do. It's just bonkers. I mean, the vampire bride, like they're dancing and sort of like this weird, she has no clothes on. She's completely naked with these giant bazookas and dancing. Like, what is happening here? But it's a gorgeous poster, whether you like the boobs or not. It's just fascinating. And the Dutch one's neat, the Spanish one's neat, but seeing on the VHS boxes is just really cool because everybody coveted them and they collected them. And at one time, before the DVD came out in 07, like they were trading for a lot of money on eBay and people were really collecting them. And then there was a bootleg DVD and like even bootleg VHSs out there for years. That kind of sucks, but it's fascinating. And then if you had one of the two laser discs, there wasn't many of those either. There was an American version and a Japanese version. And if I'm correct, I think the Japanese version was in widescreen and the American wasn't for some reason. And, that was kind of a thing. A buddy of mine years ago at Amoeba Music in Hollywood, they had one up on like the shelf. It was selling for like $40 and he bought it and gave it to me. And so I have like the Japanese laser disc as a collectible, which is pretty rad. But then, it was gone. And then finally everybody got their DVD in 2007. And they changed the cover art, which had nothing to do with the movie.
How was it for you as a teenager on the set of Monster Squad being surrounded by all these awesome effects and particularly the practical costumes created by Stan Winston? The Gillman costume, to this day, it's just stunning. It holds up 100%. Did you have an interest in that as a movie fan and how it all worked?
Well, yeah, because, being, a kid that loves to learn things or knows about things or had seen all these movies that, and understood the history of it, even at a young age of what was going on, to be part of a huge production like this was with all of the stuff going on. We've got creature effects, we've got special effects, we've got explosions, we've got cars. We've got, guns and things blowing up and monsters killing people. And it was insane. I mean, it was absolutely insane. It's just something to just sit there and just mouth agape, watch all this stuff. But you're in the middle of it. So you got to be working and doing your job. But it was fascinating to watch, especially the practical creature effects, all these guys that, I can go on for, probably 90 minutes straight talking about what they did and how they did it. But really, honestly, what they did is they, everybody knows like they weren't allowed to use the actual kind of like universal, looks because they were still being used at the theme parks at the time, if what the story is correct. And I think that's the best thing that ever happened to the Monster Squad and to these artists because they had to re-envision and reimagine and create new versions.
Still have the familiarity.
Yeah, not only and be connected to the past, but bring it in a new thing. And not only recreate and reimagine, but do it in a new fashion and change the game. And I'm convincing myself more and more over the last, couple of years when I've realized that not only Monster Squad touched a lot of fans and made this community, which is awesome. But I think on the story-wise and effects-wise, creature-wise, it actually was a paradigm shifter in movies, especially for them, but then going forward, because that was really sort of the incubator for these guys at the time. They had worked on a couple movies before and did some amazing stuff.
Was it before Predator or after Predator?
Same year. Predator came out in 87. They were shooting it. They stopped production and had to rechange it. And then Predator ends up looking a lot like Gillman. And, it's the same group of people working on it because the original thing, if everybody knows that whole Jean-Claude Van Damme in the red chicken suit running through story, which is just bonkers. No one wants to see that movie. And then you make this pretty much one of the most iconic alien creatures ever seen on film in The Predator, which is an amazing movie. And, they saved it. They saved that movie and now it's a franchise. Shane Black actually came into Script Doctor as in it. He, is the first guy to get killed as Hawkins and he's hilarious. But yeah, I think the creature effects and what they did and had to basically invent new ways to do stuff as they go. Monster Squad was part of that era and changed the game on creature. I mean, no doubt. I'd bet $100 on that and someone please prove me wrong. But most of those core guys, Tom Woodruff Jr., Alec Guinness, Steve Wang, Matt Rose, who died 2 years ago or a year ago, Shane Mahan and John, they all own their own huge shops into the biggest names in the business right now. And they've all influenced the other big names in the business and they all work together, which is crazy. And it's great to know those guys because I remember them as like 20-year-old new guys that are figuring out how to make a latex one-piece suit for Gillman. And it's insane.
I love it. So the film is completed and in the can. I can remember vividly seeing it previewed in Fangoria and I was in right away on the visuals. Then the trailer came out and that just kind of cemented it. But then it doesn't hit at the box office, which to me seems really odd. Has anything been credited for this? Was it marketing, timing?
Yeah, we cover a little of that in the documentary of why it doesn't work. And for me personally, and then from other people, I think it's a combination of a number of things. and you can start off with either one of them. It doesn't matter in no particular order. One of them, it ended up having a PG-13 rating. In the UK, it had the 15 rating, which just killed it.
Right.
That 15 rating still holds today. Like you can't, if it's showing at the Prince Charles, if you're under 15, you can't come in. And I'm like, 5-year-olds are watching this movie and loving it. Like, what is the problem here? And I think the marketing campaign, there were kind of two parallel yet didn't work together, and they were very confusing. Like you said, you saw the trailer, you saw it in Fangoria, you saw the trailer. The trailer's dark and scary and monster driven and like, like this is insane. Parents see that and go, my 10-year-old's not going to see that, or my 12, and there's no way. And then they definitely don't want to go with them because of the rating, because parents want to drop their kids off and just go, and then I'll pick you up in an hour and a half. They had to go in with them, so that ruined it. And also there was kind of like a weird marketing campaign with the wanted posters and sort of like the Old West kind of wanted, and they were kind of campy and corny,
right?
And it didn't work, and very problematic today, to use a very current word. And I think they kind of contradict itself. And then most of the reviews were bad. Like, these reviewers in, Des Moines or Spokane or Tallahassee, some loved it and some didn't. But that was a big influence at the time. Like you open up the Sunday paper or the, Friday paper of new movies coming out, and they saw this movie and they give it a bad review, like you're not going to go see it. And I think that's unfair.
Did you have a premiere for it?
Yeah, 2 huge premieres. I mean, we had a big premiere in LA, a lot of big, it was a big studio movie. So a lot of big studio celebs and publicists are getting their, people to show up. And what we did is we did 2 premieres, one in LA and one in New York City. And then there was a giant kind of studio party at the Hard Rock Cafe in each city. That was the first time I ever met Schwarzenegger. Like he came to our party for the premiere of my movie. And like there's a photo of me and Schwarzenegger, and they hired other actors to dress up as the monsters, and they looked terrible. One of the greatest stories of the impact of this movie is my super, super dear friend, Diva Zappa. I was friends with her brother, Amit, right? And Diva this is Frank Zappa's kids. And Diva she was the Phoebe of the group. Like she was the little sister that always wanted to hang out with us. And we're like, get out of the room. We're teenagers. We're hanging out with each other. Leave. But she went to that party, and she got a Polaroid photo of her and whoever the guy was in Frankenstein's monster makeup. And she still has it. And not only does she still has it, it's one of her most prized possessions. And she carries it with her everywhere she goes. And I mean, she loves that thing. And we have that on camera. I mean, it's fascinating that something like that. And Diva's in the documentary. We sat her down. I was like, you have to be a part of this. And we went to New York. Ryan and I were the only cast members that went to New York for that party. And it's covered by Entertainment Tonight. And I met a ton of people. Like I was like, even in LA, like Schwarzenegger came, and like Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas were there, and like it was great. It was one of these, big industry things. And then we were in New York City, and it was cool because I got to meet Margot Kidder. And I was like, I'm meeting Lois Lane. I mean, this is pretty rad, because she came to our party. And I was like, it's not really our party. It's for the studio and the movie, but we'll call it our party. That was fascinating, because that was the first time I'd ever been in New York City.
Incredible.
It was fun. So they did it all up. And then the movie premiered. I think also timing of when it was released was an issue. So we have rating, marketing campaign, conflicting, reviews, and timing was kind of tough, because it really is a creature Halloween movie type thing, which it became later. But they wanted to release it during the summer so the kids could go. But it released right after Lost Boys. So I always say it was too kid-oriented for the cool teenagers that were going to go see Lost Boys, even though some of them may still have enjoyed it, and some did. But it was also too scary and dark and dangerous for the 9, 10, and 11-year-olds. So you're now narrowing your window of people that are going to actually go and be able to. But that's now actually a thing. Those are called tween movies now. And they know this, and they write movies for it. That's what YA is. These are tween stories. It's not for 9-year-olds, and it's not for 15-year-olds. It's that in between. That's why they're called tween movies. And had they known that and marketed to that, I think, it might have been a different case. But that wasn't a thing back then, so it didn't matter. And I always joke ad nauseum that had they known that, and they knew we were making a tween movie, then we would have just wrapped on Monster Squad 11 Breaking Dawn, right? So it's like we would have just, the franchise would just gone forever. But it was a little ahead of its time for something like that, because they didn't know that was a thing. And I think all those things conspired to kind of kill the movie in the box office. And what's unfortunate about that era is your barometer and measuring stick of success is your first 48 hours, maybe 72. And that's not fair to anybody. And I'm not just talking about personally, I'm talking about to people like Fred Decker and filmmakers. That movie
it's
may
them
not...
Spotify numbers, it's them likes and follows again, isn't it? Coming in a different version of it.
It is. It's kind of the same thing. And like, now imagine if a movie or someone did an unboxing video or a concert and it was on YouTube, and if it didn't get 1 million views by Sunday evening, they pulled it off of YouTube. That's what happened in movies back then. Or they deleted your Twitter account. If like you're, at Monster Squad, the movie, and if you didn't get enough likes in the first 48 hours, they would delete your Twitter account. That's essentially what happened back then. And so now I think it's totally different. You can have it was a word of mouth movie. Like, these kids saw it, ran home in their neighborhood and said, yo, I just saw this movie on Saturday. We got to go see it next weekend. And they're like, okay, cool. And they went, it wasn't there. But then it happened on HBO and in your video store. Then they got to trade it around and say, this is the movie I was talking about last year. And then that sort of, kind of reinvigorated it in the neighborhoods. But who knows if, the studio had just said, okay, let's keep it in the theaters, let's push it, put a little bit more behind it. But like, no. And Shane Black kind of says it the best in the documentary. He's like, yeah, it didn't happen on day one. So, thanks guys, but sorry, see you later. And that's how studios did you back then.
So between the release of the film and like the sellout screenings, which happened in 2006, if I'm right, which I believe took everyone by surprise, had you kind of put Monster Squad to bed, or had there been a few like incidents during that time where you thought, hang on, something's happening here? You
would run into people that knew it and liked it and knew your body of work, or maybe they were your fan for, kind of everything that you did. And they loved Monster Squad. And, horror fans and Fangoria, subscribers, would be like, oh my God, that was great. I just want to let you know I like that movie. You're like, you hear that on occasion, but nothing that, like what happened since 2006, 2007 until this day. And, kind of took everybody by surprise. And we honestly thought it would kind of die out and wind down after maybe a year, maybe two. And then we're like, wait, they're coming out with the DVD and we're at this huge convention and oh boy, wait a minute. And it just exploded.
Did the documentary kind of take on a life of its own and forged its own direction from perhaps your original vision of it once you started filming?
Umbrella statement, every documentary does, right? Because you don't know what you do. But what's interesting is when Henry McComas and I, started working, with Pilgrim Studios at the time and kind of framing this out of what we thought it could be. And we wrote down our initial notes and our outline and what I knew was there, what we could pull from fans. Cause I know these stories, let's go find those. We'll find more. A lot of stuff that's in the doc was not on the calendar and we didn't know it was going to happen. Like that 17 City Alamo tour, like Fred's interview, that wasn't a guarantee. And definitely going on the road and going all these other conventions and like the Prince Charles screening, was set up before we knew it was going to happen. And then we put it on the calendar, but we had all these amazing things that just sort of slid into place in that year we were making the documentary. That's really the gold. But as you go through, what you think you have constantly evolves and constantly changes. And what Henry and Wes and the guy, were constantly doing, we were editing this film in real time as we went because we had so much to do and so much to get. And they were kind of pulling selects and crafting and finding the tone and the feel that would fit in with our framework. And then something would get thrown in there and we'd have this one great section. And then like a month later, we'd go look at it again. I'd be like, hey, where's the thing where the gal says the thing? He's like, it's out.
Yeah.
Because this replaced that because this whole thing went in a different direction. And I'm like, but that was fundamental. And he's like, things change. And I'm like, boy, that's right. That's something you learn. And it was, it's for the better. All the best stuff that we had, like there's a lot of good stuff. We shot a lot of footage. All of the best, top of the top stuff is in the film. We have 60 minutes of extras. We made a whole other hour of bonus features and extras and extended interviews, which unfortunately is not in this current release, the US and Canada release. The next step right now, we're working on the international release and like a UK release. And maybe some, London-based sales agency or distributors like, I want this. So let me know. That's what we're doing right now. And, I hope we get that on at least the international to see, the extended stuff. And because it's 60 minutes, that's a whole other movie worth of stuff. But no, absolutely. It changed a half a dozen times and like all for the better.
So kind of in closing, before I'd heard about the concept of the documentary, with it being about a film that perhaps the world as a larger picture doesn't know about, I was kind of like, well, everybody knows about this film. It's awesome. It's like, Surely you've seen it, which I think is what for a lot of fans, we feel the same way. The film's such a part of you that you must have seen it. Everyone rented that from the video store. I was wondering, outside of Monster Squad, is there a particular film which you're a fan of that people perhaps don't know of, which you think everyone else should go out and see?
Oh, man. See, these are those good questions that you wish you get like 3 days in advance. I mean, there's a ton of them. I like such a range of different types of movies. Let me see if I can pull one out here without having too much dead air. You know, a movie that I like that a lot of people do know or some people have never seen, one of my favorite movies of all time is Mr. Holland's Opus with Richard Dreyfuss.
Right.
A lot more people have actually seen it, but they're like, oh, I saw it. I'll never watch it for a second time. I was like, I know every piece of dialogue to that movie. I just like that movie. I'm trying to think of something more obscure. I recommend Mr. Holland's Opus.
Was you a big horror fan during the 80s?
You know, it's almost different. I liked horror. I understood it. I liked it. You know, obviously when you're a kid, you're scared of things. You know, I'd seen a ton of horror movies, you know, either on TV, but some of it's edited. Some of you rent at your friend's house. And then you get to go to, you know, screenings of cool stuff like, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 or something. And, you know, you see some cool stuff. I liked horror. I wasn't a horror fanatic because I was my dad's son. My dad liked science fiction and my dad liked Cold War spy movies. So I think horror took a backseat to both of those, but I still dug it all. You know, 70s slashers, you know, ghost stories. You know, I remember seeing The Exorcist probably at way too young of an age. But everybody always asks me what's the most terrifying horror movie I've ever seen, and the answer is The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Bar none. Absolute horror movie.
What about Return to Oz?
It was okay. Too modern
right.
for me. And I just loved a wide range of stuff. I was more of a sci-fi kid than a horror kid, but I liked horror. So, you know, space movies and, you know, space operas, obviously Star Wars is, you know, ridiculous. But I loved even the 50s and 60s kind of sci-fi stuff because it was all this literally reimagining what cutting edge technology could be. And then lo and behold, you have it. You know, so it's fascinating there. But I don't think sci-fi and horror are very different. They really aren't. Because when you do a romantic comedy or you do a drama or you do a biopic or historical, you know, drama, it's like it's based in things that you have to hit and you know what they are. Oh, and I loved fantasy films too. So I loved like fantasy, you know, Knight's Tales and like Kroll and Time Bandits and Ice Pirates, which is a sci-fi fantasy movie. Kroll is amazing. You know, kind of in that Dungeons and Dragons world, kind of that, you know, kind of Tolkien world when you don't know who Tolkien is. Maybe kids were reading Stephen King and some kids were reading Tolkien, but I never read Lord of the Rings when I was a kid because it was daunting. Like it was like, no way. So I really loved that stuff, but I don't think they're that much different because fantasy and horror and sci-fi, they're all the same thing. All those other things I mentioned, like rom-coms and dramedies and drama and historical, they all have to hit things and you have to stay in a box. There's no box in sci-fi. Literally, the sky is not even the limit. It's the stars. Other dimensions aren't the limit, right? Fantasy is sort of the same thing, but it's grounded on kind of terra firma, but just with different imaginings of, you know, what if the world was this instead of that? And that's why I love, and I do love Lord of the Rings, the movies. And I'm a gigantic Harry Potter, the films fan. Like I love that world build. I love the set designs. I love the stories. I love the kids, and I love every single character. Even as an adult, like the books you don't need because they're written for a certain age and the time, which I thought was fascinating and brought kids to reading again, which I'm a reader. I love reading. But the movies, they're on right now. They're on a marathon right now, and I'm watching them all night. I got my mom sat and watched The Order of Phoenix with me the other night. Hard time following it because she's dropping right in the middle of this epic tale, and I'm trying to explain all this stuff, and she's almost 80, and she's like, what? But then she gets it. She's like, okay. And I love it. She's like, is that Voldemort? I'm like, no, that's not Voldemort. That's Snape. Don't worry about it. But he works for Voldemort. I was like, not really. Not really. And so I just become a kid again when I'm watching Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. But horror there's no limit to the imagination there, but it's internal. So horror movies are all about going inside the human condition and the human mind. And that's what makes it fantastically terrifying. Science fiction is your imagination is your only limit about what could be, but based on theoretical science or maybe things or, you know, what we could see in the future, which is fascinating to me. And then fantasy is sort of the same. It's almost sort of a blend of that, you know, with creatures and monsters and tales with dragons and absolutely, I'm in. Absolutely in, because at heart I'm very conflicted with the way my brain works, and I've mentioned that a couple of times earlier. But I'm left-handed, so my right brain is activated with a lot of, technical stuff and logical pragmatism, things like that. But I'm also a very creative person. I counterbalance. I'm at odds with myself a lot. And that used to be a struggle. But now I've learned to kind of use both of those to help each other. And that's kind of neat. And that's why I kind of bounce and I can go and be intrigued by a James Bond movie and then watch Kroll, right after that and not lose any enthusiasm.
You're a Red Dawn fan as well, right?
I'm a huge Red Dawn fan. Absolutely. That's one
of the best opening scenes of a film ever. I'll fight somebody about that one.
The imagery of out the window of the classroom and the paratroopers are landing it. It's absolutely a gorgeous shot.
Yeah.
It really is. And terrifying at the same time. So there's two blends there. Everybody asks, because they go, Monster Squad's my favorite kids adventure movie of all time. And they're like, what's your favorite kids adventure movie of all time? I go, Red Dawn.
What?
And they go, that's not a kids adventure movie. I was like, isn't it? It's the ultimate kids adventure movie.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
And they're like, well, Monster Squad I loved because it was fascinating and it was kind of real and it was dangerous and we loved it. I was like, so was Red Dawn. But the problem is it's too buried in reality, too based in reality at the time. And so being movies I love kids adventures, because I absolutely would have been part of the Wolverines. Absolutely. I hope I would have been, and not just cowered and, gone into the camp. But it's not only a kids adventure movie, but it's a Cold War. I mean, it's absolutely the pinnacle of Cold War movies. And that's what we grew up in. Right. And, it's East versus West, the Soviets versus the Allies. And, it's fascinating. And that all, when you're a kid, that's very strong. Yeah. But see, we also had in our era, we had, Vietnam movies, which was the other side of that. It wasn't rah, rah USA or, rah, rah Churchill. It was, this sucks. Yeah. This is not good stuff. And this was a bad idea and it didn't work out too well. Why were we doing this?
Double header of Platoon and Full Metal Jacket.
Right at the same time. Yeah. And casualties of war and all this. You're like, what is happening here? So you get that at the same time. But even prior to that, I grew up with my dad, who's a World War II. My dad was older than most of my friends' dads, but so I love World War II movies and history. And so that I learned so much from those. And then, of course, you read that and you hear something and what's the bulge? And then, again, you go to the encyclopedias and get the B out and look up Battle of the Bulge. And so as like a 10-year-old, I'm understanding what they're talking about, while my other friends are at the fair getting high on cotton candy or something. I'm like, I don't even like cotton candy. I want to watch those movies. And I still do that. My encyclopedia is my phone. I will be watching a movie and something that comes up that I was like, wait, I know what that is. What is that again? Or I don't know what that is. I'm looking that up right now. I do that constantly.
Love it.
I did that as a kid with my encyclopedias. And then you get big books and then you know everything there is to know about Audie Murphy and ninjas and Lady Hawk and Knights of the Round Table.
Awesome.
And the Crusaders and the Knights Templar. And you're like, what is this kid talking about?
Dude, thank you ever so much for your time. I've loved chatting with you. It's been great.
Yeah, man. Let's do it again. Hit me up. We can talk about whatever you want to. We'll talk about Red Dawn.
When do we get to see Baby Frankenstein?
Oh, Baby Frankenstein. That's out. That's actually, I don't know if it's out in the UK or not. Oh man, Baby Frankenstein, a great experiment of a micro budget kind of local production. It's out on VOD and on DVD, Blu-ray. John Young-Condi is the director and writer of that. I'm only attached to that because two friends of mine who, were super cool people named TJ and Denise were in Northeast Pennsylvania at the time because that's where he's from. And they met this guy that wants to make this movie. They were production people. They're like, well, let's make this movie. And then I guess the conversation came up where they knew me and they were like, oh my God, would he be in this movie? And I think their first reaction was probably not. But I was like, will this help you? Does it help the movie? Like, is it cool? And, I like doing, weird off the cuff things that are, and you try to make it fun and you try to help, whatever's going on. And it ended up being a fun little romp in the neighborhood. Is it the world's slickest movie? By no means.
It looked, I'm not ahead of it. I saw the trailer. I was like, holy shit, this looks amazing.
Yeah, that's what the charm is. And it ends up, working out. So you got to give kudos where kudos is due. And it's fun. And it got a little bit of a kind of audience when it first released about 3 months ago or 4 months ago.
Okay.
So it's still out on VOD, I think. I think you can buy a Blu-ray or a DVD. Just look it up somewhere.
Nice.
It's fun. It's kind of a mashup of all of those movies that almost we were talking about. There's a little E.T., there's a little kind of hijinks. There's, a bumbling criminal duo. I mean, it ended up being fun.
Sweet, dude. Well, again, thank you ever so much for your time. I've loved it and appreciate it.
If I can help out again, let me know. We'll get together. I enjoyed it.
Awesome, dude. You take care.
Thanks, Rob. Have a good one.
How was that? I think we're all officially in the goddamn club now, aren't we? I want to send a big thank you to André for such a fun chat, and I'm pretty sure I need to take him up on his offer of another at some point to really nerd out over Red Dawn. As mentioned, please check out Wolfman's Got Nards, the Monster Squad documentary, by visiting thesquaddoc.com. And also, if you've never seen the Monster Squad and this chat inspires you to check it out, do please drop me a line and let me know what you thought. For now, thanks as always for supporting the Straight to Video podcast. This one really was a blast for me, and I hope you enjoyed it as much too. Till next time, continue to take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you all again real soon.